Welcome to the Small Business Sisterhood podcast. I'm your host, Pepper Makepeace, an online business strategist for female solopreneurs and side hustlers, and founder of the Small Business Sisterhood, an online membership community serving small business owners in the first stages of business. Join me as I go behind the scenes with female entrepreneurs, revealing the struggles, strategies, and inspiring stories of these amazing women. If you're interested in connecting with like-minded women, learning effective business strategies from the experts, and being a part of a mastermind group that helps you grow your business, check us out at smallbusinesssisterhood.com. Today we're talking to Dannie Fountain, a marketing and PR strategist for creative entrepreneurs, with more than 5 years experience working in marketing for brands such as Whirlpool, H&R Block, and Mr. Kate, and more than 7 years experience as a creative entrepreneur. Dannie works with entrepreneurs to brainstorm, strategize, and implement marketing plans and processes to better their business. In addition to her marketing work, Dannie is the author of The Side Hustle Gal, The Bucketlist Babe, and a forthcoming third book, One Honest Woman, also releasing in 2017. Thank you for being on the podcast, Dannie. I'm so excited to talk to you again.
I'm so excited.
So tell everybody a little bit about you and your business.
Sure thing. I am a marketing and business strategist, so I help creative entrepreneurs and corporate clients come up with strategic solutions to their business problems. I'm also a digital nomad. I'm traveling the world for the year of 2017. And with that comes an element of lifestyle blogging, and I'm also an author.
That's all very impressive, and I don't know which one to dig into first. Tell me about the strategy piece. How do you work with people? Or do you work with people or just businesses?
It's a mix of both. My first client was when I was in high school, of all places, and I was dating the child of a state senator, a state representative at the time. And the dad was like, hey, I'm running for state senate. Do you want to help me with a marketing strategy to get the word out to young voters? Not yet being a voting age myself, I said, why the heck not? And I helped him craft a strategy and ended up becoming his youth campaign manager. He went on to win that Senate seat and 2 elections since, and it kind of just spiraled from there. So I've helped individuals. I help small businesses. I've helped Christina Scalera. I help a lot of wedding planners. There seems to be a niche that I've carved out there as well. And then I also help corporate clients. I've worked with Whirlpool and H&R Block and Know Your Company, which is a subsidiary of Basecamp. So kind of a split target.
That's a lot of awesome experience that you have. That's really cool.
It's been fun, yeah.
And you started so early. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You must have it in your blood.
Yeah, well, my mom is a portrait and wedding photographer. So very much so, yeah.
Awesome. So the digital nomad piece is relatively new, correct?
Yes, we are we're like a month and a half into that. That was something that was not planned. I decided the week after Thanksgiving of 2016 that I was going nomad because I was looking at my schedule and starting to do my power sheets for this year when I realized I was going to be traveling more than I was going to be home. And my bootstrapping self did not want to pay $1,000 a month for an apartment that I would see 6 nights in my own bed each month. So I donated 75% of my belongings, packed everything else, and sent it to a friend in Michigan. And I live out of a suitcase and a backpack now.
I love it. You are so awesome.
It's been fun so far. January was a wild ride of crazy adventures. Caught myself some food poisoning, had a really good Airbnb. January was an adventure. Got stopped at security because getting on a plane because I have an Arabic tattoo on my back. And I wore a tank top through security like an idiot. So January was a wild ride of adventure, but I'm looking forward to seeing what the rest of the year holds.
Yes, you've picked an interesting political climate in which to travel.
Yes. And I'm a dual citizen, so I travel on either an American or a British passport, depending on what suits my fancy, which makes things interesting as well.
I love you. You're such an inspiration, and I'm happy to know you.
You're so sweet. Oh,
So
God.
how do you get any work done while you're traveling? This is always because I can barely get work done when I'm home. So tell me how that works.
Being the full court press kind of girl that I am, I dove into this year without a clear plan. I kept my same office hours from when I was not a nomad. And to be quite frank, I dropped some balls in January. A lot of them. Because when you're traveling, you don't just lose your travel days, you also lose the first day when you're there because you're unpacking, you're not sure where to work, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you lose the last day too because you're packing and you're getting stuff together. So you actually lose a lot of time being a nomad. And then you're also in new places, so you want to see where you are.
Yeah.
So January was a lot of trial and error and a lot of messy mistakes. But I figured out a pretty good system. I have 6 hours on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday that I'm in the office, totally available for client calls, podcast recordings, whatever the case may be. And then outside of that, I don't respond to emails, don't do any of that because I have a limited amount of time to get things done. And it's been working. Now that I have a good structure in place, it is working much better, which is good because you're right. When you're a nomad, it's insane trying to get things done on the road.
Well, if anybody can do it, I know that you can. Because you get stuff done.
I do my best.
On that point, you published a book in September, and now you have another one coming out in March. Tell me about those a little bit.
Yeah, so the book in September was supposed to be just like this one-off book. I wasn't going to really go anywhere beyond that. And it was centered around this idea of the side hustle gal and this emerging side hustle culture that we're seeing. Because even the prevalence of full-time entrepreneurship in mainstream culture is relatively new. You go back about 5 years and the mention of the word entrepreneur in society drops by something like 700%. I was doing the reading the other day on this. And so the side hustle culture is even more misunderstood than that. And at the time, being a side hustle gal myself, as the book was being crafted, I was frustrated. And there was a lot of conversation around, are we less than because we don't do this full time, but we also don't completely fit into the corporate world because we're hustling on the side.
Right.
And so the book was born out of this desire to showcase journeys and that every journey is different. So it highlights 10 different entrepreneurs, 8 different businesses of women and men making that side hustle to full-time transition, and a couple folks who are still part-time entrepreneurs going through what that looks like to them. And there's some really powerful stories in there. Brittany and Reed Photography tell a story of the hustle of entrepreneurship almost killing their marriage, and they took a break, and they never split up, but they took a break and then got remarried because entrepreneurship had just crushed their marriage.
Wow.
So there are some really cool stories in the book. And then after that, the Side Hustle Gal was so well received that I got asked, what collection of stories am I doing next? And travel is my number one passion, period. Like, it's written across my face. And so the idea for the Bucketlist Babe was born at the Savvy Experience last year, so late August. Mm-hmm. The Side Hustle Gal hadn't even come out yet. And this idea for the Bucketlist Babe came about centered around the idea that everyone has a bucket list. It might just not be travel. Mm-hmm. So the Bucketlist Babe collects 30 entrepreneurs' bucket lists and then cross-references that with their entrepreneurial journey and how the two have influenced one another. And you see a lot of parallels because a lot of people either did not even have entrepreneurship on the top 100 of their bucket list, if it even went that far, and other people it was number one. Wow. And you see how both of those manifest and how the entrepreneurial journeys are different because of that, like whether they had planned or hadn't planned to be an entrepreneur. So that will be coming out in March, and I'm really excited. Some incredible people have told their stories. Natalie Frank took some time to share her story with us, some other really talented folks. So I'm excited to see what the world thinks of their journeys.
That's amazing. So both books are collections of stories about other entrepreneurs, correct?
Yes. And then the third book in the series is just my story. That's coming this September.
Wow. You are on it.
I was making a joke last year. Every time I went to a conference last year, a new book idea sprung up. So I said I needed to stop going to conferences because it was making me write all these books.
Well, it sounds like the conferences were working to get you inspired. So that's...
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what is the process of book writing when it's a collection of stories? Like, can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's not quite what you would expect. I probably spent just as much time promoting my call for submissions as another writer would just writing the book themselves. Especially for the Bucketlist Babe. I knew that we had done close to 15 stories for Side Hustle Gal and that I wanted to double that for Bucketlist Babe. So I was out there seeking 30 submissions. The idea for the book came August 31st at Savvy. The book had to go to the editor by Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow.
So in that 2-month span, I thought out 30 submissions, more than 30 submissions, whittled it back to 30, and then even found a couple of folks who had written blog posts that were relevant to the topic and got permission to republish those. Uh-huh. And so once those were all collected, it goes to the editor. The editor edits as if it were just one person's writing. Uh-huh. And then you have to start to weave the common thread. So I wrote an intro chapter and a closing chapter that kind of sets the scene of what the reader will experience. And then at the end, what the reader should do next. So any author, especially starting to write my own book, would say, oh, it's not as much work as writing a book yourself, which is true. It is a lot of logistics.
I bet. You may not do as much writing, but I bet you do even more other stuff to make it happen. So,
And especially, so we're in the pre-launch phase right now for the whole month of February. And when you're one author publishing one book, the promo becomes all around the book. But when you have 30, 31, if you count me, authors all contributing to a book, and you have 28 days in the month of February, you have to find a way to mention everybody in less days than there are people. So even the promotional process has been interesting.
Wow. And are you doing all of that on your own?
So I do have a team. I have a VA, Caitlin. We actually went to college together. And she also does a lot of marketing work. She's a marketing professional at a nonprofit, so she freelances for me on the side. And then Sarah is my basically a creative director. Morgan, I have an art director, and then I also have a business manager. And so together we're doing a lot of that together.
Okay.
But being the strategist, I'm crafting all of those plans. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So the new book that you're working on now, that's just about you, are you telling your story basically, or is it something else?
So that's an interesting question. Another conference last year, I was sitting at Inspired Conference, and Heather Crabtree asked me a very pointed question. She was like, so you've written The Side Hustle Gal. I know you're working on the Bucketlist Babe because that idea came from the Savvy experience. When are you going to tell your story? And I was like, well, I have. Like through these books, you get the idea that I was a side hustle gal and I am a Bucketlist Babe. You get the idea that these are sort of my stories too. And she was like, no, girl, quit trying to back out of the corner. When are you going to tell your story. So the idea for the third book came. Heather is largely responsible for the title as well, which is One Honest Woman, centered around the idea that I have spent the past 2 years showcasing others' stories and never really planned to write a book about myself because I always said I didn't have enough of a story to tell to fill a compelling amount of pages. But One Honest Woman seeks to tell the story of my journey, kind of like age 6 to present. And there's a lot that's happened. And I like to tell it as it's a raw story of guts and courage and what it means to wake up one day and believe you'll come out the other side. Because I'm very much a dichotomy. I'm traveled, well-educated, young 20-something, but I'm the product of an abusive childhood. So that kind of dichotomy will form the basis of the book.
I cannot wait to read that. That sounds really powerful.
I'm so excited.
I am so inspired by you. I love that you've incorporated other entrepreneurs in your stories and now you're willing to kind of dive in with your own. Do you think that your ability to tell your own story kind of had to come after those 2 books because listening to other people tell their stories?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was that I always stood in this place, and we all do it. I stood in this place of my story is too different. No one would connect. But as I was sitting at Inspired Retreat and as I've been having conversations with my business coach trying to identify like the flow of the book, there's more commonality than you'd expect. One Honest Woman will open with the story of when I was 3 years old and my parents and grandparents took me to the Shriners Circus. And at the end of the circus, they let everyone take elephant rides. And at the end of the elephant rides, I tugged on my grandma's sleeve and asked her to ask the elephant trainer if I could ride alone. And I was 3 years old, and they let me climb on the back of this elephant all by myself. And I did 2 or 3 laps around the ring by myself. And that's kind of a metaphor for my life. I've always been the one that's like not afraid to make the ballsy move. And that is more relatable than I thought it was. So it's been interesting to pull those pieces out.
Wow, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
So what's that journey been like for you internally? Like, obviously you're inspiring so many people, including myself, with all of the work that you're doing. Has it changed anything inside?
It's been an interesting journey because I am a very outgoing and loud human, but I'm the quietest member of my family. So that only tells you how loud my family is. But through that, I've always been the person that shoves my foot in my mouth at every possible moment. I remember going on a date with someone like late college, and they were a social worker. And just from my own experience, like coming from an abusive childhood, the first words out of my mouth to this social worker were, "Oh, so you take children away from their homes." And so I've always been this kind of person who spoke without thinking. But through pulling back the layers of my own story and watching how people have opened up to me because of reading The Side Hustle Gal or contributing to the Bucketlist Babe, I've become somewhat of a vessel for story, if you will. And that experience of being a vessel has taught me a lot of grace and humility, and has taught me to maybe listen before I speak. So it's been, and it's come at a time, I'm 23. So it's come at a time of, I'm already as just a human being growing from college age adult to real adult. So it's played a bigger role in my journey than I think it would have if I would have done this at an older or younger age.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. And I think everybody's talking about how telling your story is so important. And I think a lot of us, I'm terrified to tell my full story. You know, I think we probably all have pieces of it that we would rather not share or are afraid to kind of shed light on. And being a vessel of those stories, like you said, I would imagine that would be kind of empowering. And like you said, it's probably humbling and just to see how many of us have come through that to the other side and be able to talk about that yourself. That's really powerful. And, that there's this movement in entrepreneurship too of you have to tell your story, you have to tell your story. And it's not always easy.
And you also, the biggest thing I've learned is that you can't just tell your story for story's sake. If I were to slap up the story of like what happened to me as a child and where I've come since, nobody would care. I would be shouting my story from the mountaintops and it would be echoing further away. It's finding the purpose with which you tell your story that gives it power. And that might even be the piece missing from entrepreneurship, because I see vulnerability and authenticity and all of these buzzwords. But if you don't tell your story with an intended message, it gets lost.
Absolutely. Very well said. So how do you find the message or purpose within your story to connect it back to your business? Like, how does that work?
That's a good question. And it's been interesting, because you also have to be mindful of the fact that even though vulnerability and authenticity are so important, there are just some pieces of dirty laundry that nobody should air. I mean, my childhood was such that it was, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to put my birth mom on blast to tell a story of triumph. That doesn't do anyone any good. So it's all about just outlining, and it's been an adventure. It's been a lot of voice memos, and it's been a lot of talking to my grandparents, trying to identify like the bigger pieces of my life, find the threads, and then bring in the pieces of struggle that fit with the triumphs. So by starting with the triumphs, you're able to identify the success story. And then once you've identified the success story, you identify the levers that got you there. And so even though the book is called One Honest Woman, you don't get my entire dirty laundry. You get probably 3/4 of it. That makes sense.
Absolutely. No, I get that. What a process. Like, you've been on a ride, I bet.
It's been interesting. And next month, I celebrate 6 years from when I was adopted. So like finishing the book this year is really, because I'm far enough removed from my childhood now that I'm able to tell the story in a way that serves others. So it's a really exciting time.
Wow. I am so happy for you that you're getting to do this and that you're willing to go there and be authentic and vulnerable, but also with the message and the purpose with it. I think that that's really awesome, and I want to hug you.
I see you hugging me. Okay.
So awesome. I can't wait to read the 2 new books that you have. I'm so excited.
It's going to be really exciting to see what the reaction is. The second book, it launches next month, but the Lakeside Conference in Wisconsin has done me the pleasure of offering to host a book launch party during the conference. So it's going to be really exciting to literally get to release the book with humans. Instead of just on my computer. I'm really excited for that experience.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Can we dive in a little more about your decision to become the digital nomad?
So I've always been that kind of person that once I get an idea, it's happening, even if it's not the greatest idea. And so the conversation around becoming a nomad started happening the week after Thanksgiving, so late November. And I was a nomad on December 23rd. So in less than a month's time, I made it happen. But the decision wasn't made lightly either. And it's not a decision for everyone. I'm young. I'm single. And I also don't have any kind of large commitment. And I also have the fortune of my place in life where I'm 23 with a master's degree, which means 2 years from now, I could decide that my entire life until this point has been a complete screw up, and I could go and apply for jobs, and I could be the age of a traditional master's grad, 25. So for me, the decision basically was, let's just see what happens. It makes more financial sense anyway. And I'm one of those very planful people. So this year has been incredibly growth provoking in terms of the second week of January. I still didn't know where I was staying the third week of January. So just exploring this whole lifestyle of nomadism provokes just growth. I guess it's all about growth lately is what I'm saying. So the decision was made very quickly, but not lightly in the least.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That, I mean, you are in the space that you can do that with relative ease. It's totally inspiring that you are there and you can do that and you're getting to see the world and make that work. And I have a bit of that in me. I moved to New York City because somebody said that, or they had just been to New York, and I was like, "Oh, I've always wanted to live there." And he said, "Well, what's stopping you?" And I didn't have an answer. And so a month and a half later, I moved to New York.
And I think like there are lessons from the nomad life that can apply to anyone. And surprisingly, like the people you think shouldn't be nomads are. Like if you've ever heard of Copper Kettle Co., they are brand and web designers, and they are a married couple with 3 children, and they are digital nomads. Like if you were thinking of the typical digital nomad, your response would be no. 3 children, all under the age of like 5.
Oh, that sounds fun.
I mean, they're killing it. And then those lessons from nomadism can really like cross everything, because nomadism for me has also been an exercise in minimalism. It's been an exercise in practicality. I'm basically doing a forced contentment challenge. So it's been a lot of other lessons that have come into it too that anyone can totally take.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that, even the people that are wanting to work a limited number of days, like even as simple as that, like how do you make that work and then do whatever you want on the other days? You're kind of forced to do that because that's your situation. But people that aren't in that forced situation, I think it would be inspiring to see how that works and that it's actually achievable.
Oh yeah.
There's definitely messages that go across the board. And I do want to clarify that I was in no way saying that you had to be single and young and unattached to be a nomad, because I do not believe that. But you have to, like the couple that is traveling with their kids, like they had to have that conversation and do that together. And so if you have that ability to have somebody do that with you, obviously that is awesome too. And it's interesting.
And I feel like they have it even harder than I do, because Kirsten is still nursing one of her children. Like one of them is under a year old. Plus, they've removed themselves from the built-in childcare of Kelly's parents. So like by going nomad, they've made so much more work for themselves. So they have it even harder than I do.
Well, so it's interesting. So you were talking about how, 5 years ago, entrepreneurship was not talked about a lot or near as much as it is now. And then came the side hustle. And now we're seeing kind of this emergence of more digital nomads. I know I still get shit for being an entrepreneur, like go get a real job kind of mentality is something that we all kind of still experience. And then the side hustle has that same kind of, what are you doing? Have you seen that with also the digital nomad? Like, are they judgy? Are they jealous? Or like what's happening? And is that kind of, have you had that at all?
So it's been a split down the middle between pure excitement and congratulations and what the heck are you doing? And the people in both camps have really been interesting to me. The people that I expected to be most against this year of digital nomadism were my grandparents. And my grandparents are obsessed. They get my monthly Nomad newsletter. I get weekly emails. Where are you in the world now? How are your flights going? Can we find anything for you? They are drinking the Kool-Aid. And then the person who I thought, would be in the excitement camp, and isn't so much, is my mom, actually, because her challenge is, so you're a digital nomad, you're traveling the world, but you haven't been home since 2015. When can we get Michigan on the book? So, and then, in amongst that, watching the reactions of people I went to college with, people I went to high school with, even clients, trying to understand the why. And even more than that, having a passion for something is literally having a willingness to suffer for something. But the willingness to suffer for the nomad life is much more visible than the willingness to suffer as a painter, perhaps. The missed flights, the security checks, the weird Airbnbs, all of that is much more visible to everyone else than the carpal tunnel of painting or the mental exhaustion of always writing. So I think it's been interesting to watch how people react to the much more visible suffering I'm willing to put myself through. So it's been a pretty split reaction, but whatever side people have been on, it's been like far over. There's no one who's been kind of meh about it.
I love, again, how universal things are, because I think a lot of us, even starting to do a business, we get a lot of shit from people or we get a lot of support from people. And you're right. It's either one or the other. It's never really in the middle. And so how do you process that? Like, what advice would you give to people that are in that space that aren't necessarily supported by the people that they would want to be supported by?
So I keep going back to the example. There was one woman in the Side Hustle Gal who told us the story of her husband so not being supportive of entrepreneurship. And I read that and I was like, damn, this is the person who she has selected to be a life partner, who they're supposed to like have the same goals, have the same ideals, be working towards this combined future. And he's so not on board. And the guy had legitimate reasons. He was scared for their future. They wanted to have kids, Yeah. But the thing that she said to me that was most powerful is that you cannot force someone who is unwilling to support you, to support you. Instead, you have to seek out folks who are interested in what you're doing. And her relationship with her husband was salvaged because, not that it was ever in a bad place to begin with, but like this whole entrepreneurship journey didn't become the massive problem that it could have, because it actually turned out her best friend was so totally on board with the entrepreneurship thing, and her best friend was able to pour support into her so that she didn't feel like lacking, that her husband wasn't providing that support. And that's so true, like for the nomad life too. I can't force people to get on board. I just continue to share what I'm doing, and they read and they have their opinions, and the people that do support what I'm doing, that's where I get my excitement from.
Well, that is such a powerful tip for people, because, you know, I have clients or friends that are entrepreneurs that don't get supported, and finding that support elsewhere is super powerful, and which is why I'm starting the Small Business Sisterhood, is to have that space to get that support and to not feel judged, and it's safe to say this is hard. And so I totally get that.
The best exercise I could ever recommend, just being a young person and having this experience, being single means I go on a lot of dates, which means I explain to a lot of non-entrepreneurs what the heck I do on a daily basis. And even if you're not single or young or whatever, that exercise of trying to explain to someone you're theoretically on a date with what you do is the best way to like clearly define what you do, because if they don't get it, like I've had people so not get it on a date and they peace out. Like their interest goes from, oh my goodness, this mystical entrepreneurship thing that you do, I think I could get behind it, to I don't get it. Nope. Bye. So even taking that exercise of trying to explain it to a fake date helps.
It's so funny. Do people that work 9 to 5 have to justify their life decisions as much as entrepreneurs do?
No. So I can explain, oh, I work with Whirlpool and I do this. And they hear the word Whirlpool and instantly what I do is seen as much more valid, which is so annoying. Because if you don't have a corporate client, you don't have that easy fix. But you're right. Like I'm literally doing right now the same thing I was doing in my 9 to 5, just on a more strategic versus tactical level. But I spend 3 times as much time justifying what I do now versus when I worked in the corporate world. All I had to say was, oh, I'm the assistant brand manager of Whirlpool Laundry. And people were like, oh, cool. So, yeah, that's the thing.
It really is, isn't it? We are a brave tribe.
Amen to that. So passion is a willingness to suffer, and we are willing to suffer.
One of the top requirements of entrepreneurship.
Yes.
No, it's not always that bad, right?
It's so funny because all of my corporate friends repeat that quote that's been like so troped out. The quote that an entrepreneur is someone who quits a 40-hour work week working for someone else to work an 80-hour work week for themselves. And my corporate friends will throw that in my face and they'll say, well, you work way more than I do. And my response is always, but it never feels like work to me. And all I hear you do is bitching about your job. So
right.
we have to remember that we chose to do this because we were passionate.
Yes. Well, and I want to say I have a strong passion in my heart that there's a place for everybody, and entrepreneurship is not for everybody, and that doesn't mean the other jobs are lesser, but it does take a special person to want to even do what we do, and it's okay that other people don't always get that. But it's so nice to talk to people that do get that because I feel a little less crazy.
And if we lose the corporate employees, like going back to my old example of Whirlpool, I'm going to grow up and buy a house someday, right? But if everybody leaves Whirlpool to become an entrepreneur, who's going to decide the washer that I'm going to buy in 10 years? So, I mean, unless in 10 years some entrepreneur has come up with something, washes your clothes without a washer.
Oh, so tell me about, honestly, I feel like you have so many first years, I'm not sure which to ask you about because you've transitioned from, different aspects of entrepreneurship. And so I'm just going to say, in your journey in general, has there been anything surprising or difficult that you would like to talk about?
That's a good question. There's something that I learned the hard way. That someone recently summed up to me so succinctly. It's brilliant. If you've never heard of Stacey Flowers, she gives this TED Talk on happiness, and her whole thing is happiness, and she has the Happy Conference, and basically like her life purpose is to show you that you can be happy. And my entire life, and like this journey through entrepreneurship, I struggled to fit my passions and my skills together because my passion is travel, but I don't have a nice complementary skill like writing or photography or, anything that could go really well with travel. Right. My skill is strategy. And throughout this whole journey, I've pivoted a lot in my business because I was always seeking this intersection and I could never find it. One might even say I still haven't found it, and I'm a digital nomad, for God's sake. But Stacey sums it up so easily. She says that the formula for happiness is passion plus purpose plus platform. And your passion is the thing that you're passionate about. In my case, travel. Your purpose are your unique skills and abilities. In my case, strategy, strategic thinking, marketing, etc. And those two things never, ever, 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 ever change. You should build your life around those. What will change is your platform. So using me as an example, she would say that during my corporate job was my platform for better understanding my passion because my corporate job gave me the money to travel a lot. And now as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship is my platform. My purpose pays the bills, which then allows me to explore my passion. And having that understanding, I wish I would have had it 8 years ago. Makes life so much easier because what so many of us do is we choose one platform. So we become a business coach or we become a professional podcaster and we try and fit different purposes and different passions in the platform. And that doesn't work. So It's the platform that you should be constantly switching out. And she explains that so much better than I do, but it's brilliant.
That's awesome. I love that. And I've never heard it put that way. That's a really interesting way to look at that. And it does kind of open that up a little bit so that you can be a little more flexible but still incorporate everything. And I like that a lot.
Exactly. You get it. You get it.
So what is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody that's just starting out?
Oh, this is a good question. This is about to be controversial, but you do not need a brand or a website or a logo or a social media platform to start a business. Those things will be the things that make you wait, because all of those things come with a tremendous expense. You, as a human being, are already equipped with all the skills and tools, if you're meant to be an entrepreneur, that you need. Start through conversation. Because, my first logo, you're going to love this. My first logo was a white circle, a blue circle, a black circle. They overlapped Venn diagram style and faded to gradients in the middle. What? Has nothing to do with what I'm doing. I made it in Microsoft Word and then screenshot it and used it as my logo.
That's awesome.
And
look at you now.
Well, that process of crafting that 3-circle thing in Microsoft Word took me 3 months.
Oh, wow.
That is what I dedicated my time to for 3 months. All of the things that I could have done in those 3 months. Your business is not your brand. Your business is not your logo. Your business is not your website. Your business is you.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Just saying. It takes a little while to wrap your mind about that, but I totally understand you because it really is it comes back to your passion and your purpose and what does that look like in terms of the platform of entrepreneurship. And those aspects, the brand, the website, etc., those are tools that you can use in the platform to grow your business, expand your business, but it isn't the entirety of your business, and it isn't the core of your business.
Right, because entrepreneurship, though it's researched in the past 5 years, entrepreneurship has existed since the beginning of the time, like our time on this earth. Romans didn't have brands and websites and logos.
Really?
Just saying. Sure? Vikings didn't have brands and websites and logos. What everyone consistently throughout history has had as a tool for entrepreneurship is themselves and conversation.
Well, and focusing on that conversation piece of connecting with people and talking about what it is that you do and are passionate about, that is so much more important than having a pretty website.
Amen. Because if your website is pretty, but it doesn't tell me what you do, I'm still not buying.
Come on.
And I love pretty. I love pretty. Like, I can get down with some flowers. My brand used to be pink. I can get down with some pretty, but it's not going to make me pull the trigger and give you my credit card.
That's true. Yes, I love it. Okay, so what's an actionable step that people can take based on your advice? Something really tangible.
So the very first thing that you can do, and it's free and it doesn't take that much time, is craft your elevator pitch. Because that's the gateway to every single conversation. If you can succinctly and concisely explain what you do in 30 to 45 seconds flat in a way that prompts questions to continue the conversation, you're in. Your foot's in the door everywhere.
Any resources on how to craft a good elevator speech?
Actually, my episode on the Bosses and Booze podcast, I walked through how to craft an elevator pitch in 7 minutes.
Bam. Done.
All
right. Well, I will link to that in the show notes when this goes out. Because that is awesome. Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've had so much fun talking to you, and you are, again, I know I keep saying it, but you're so inspiring to me. I love you, and you are awesome.
We always have the best time. I'm just sad for the listeners that there was no spider for us to laugh about this time.
I'm going to have to do a bloopers reel. I still have that part of the recording. Definitely.
Here you go, listeners. Here is 45 seconds of Danny freaking out over a spider.
That could be its own episode. Just that.
How not to behave as an entrepreneur.
But you were being so authentic.
true. Oh, this
It
is
could be your
true.
total promo for your new book.
Oh, dear goodness. Oh, I always have the best time talking to you.
And with you, I'm so glad that you are doing what you do and letting us into that a little bit with your books and being willing to talk about your stories. Thank you for being
You're
brave.
welcome. Yeah.
How can people find you on the internet since you aren't in any one location very long?
The best place is over on Instagram at Dannie Fountain. My feed is black and white now, so you'll get everything from travel to the weird stuff that I find to actual business advice.
That's great. And your website, if people want to read more about like what you're doing on your trip?
DannieFountain.com. Super easy.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dannie. I wish you the best in your travels, and I can't wait to follow along on your blog and your Instagram feed.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dannie, for talking with us today. You can find out more information about Dannie and a link to her website in the show notes for this episode at smallbusinesssisterhood.com/12. I hope you found this episode useful and inspiring. If you did, please pop over to iTunes and leave a review. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.